Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT, back again with another episode of Locals Live. And you all laughed at me. You thought I was crazy for building Sky Striker in the wake of the ban list, but who's laughing after that YCS victory? Ha ha ha, it's me. This is our first Locals with the deck. We are not playing the demise version, just heads up Sky Striker, and I am playing like a huge bowl of spaghetti. My opponent is on Hero. We're going to Ash Blossom his Fusion Destiny, and he will pass, revealing why Hero is not currently dominating top tables. I'm a huge fan of Hero, but unfortunately can't justify buying a copy of Bane and a copy of a Duster to play it in paper. Thankfully my opponent can, so we're going to get to see if you run into them. We're going to Terraforming, they'll Ash our Terraforming, and unfortunately for them, I have an Engage in hand. We'll go ahead and activate Engage in order to get ourselves a copy of Ray. Afterwards, we reveal that we also had an Area 0. This hand was just a little bit stacked. We'll normal summon a copy of Ray, tag out for a copy of Kagari in response to the activation of the Area 0 trigger. That Kagari, of course, is going to target and engage, something I vocalize but don't do until a couple of steps later. Again, bowl of spaghetti here, just looking for my Parmesan. We'll shuffle the deck back up, present it to our opponent, and then look at the graveyard. I see the engage here, but don't register it. So afterwards, we'll go into Hayate, and we'll attack directly. That puts enough spells in the graveyard that this engage should be able to draw an additional card, provided we are willing to burn one of the less important Sky Striker cards from our hand. I'm going to do Hayate's effect first, sending a copy of Area 0 from my deck to the graveyard. Nothing with 2. And, oh, the Engage is still in there? Yeah, probably critical we add that back to the hand as well. In main phase 2, we're going to link summon a copy of Shizuku to prepare for an end-step activation. We'll activate, what is this, Eagle Booster on Shizuku. Doesn't have a lot of applications against Hero, unfortunately, but does allow us to draw an additional card with this copy of Engage in a hand that is otherwise kind of light. Now, I screw up here as well. Because Multirole is on the field when I send this Engage to the graveyard, I think that it has a counter on it, despite the fact that clearly I have not activated a Sky Striker spell by the time we roll around to end phase. My opponent doesn't catch it either, and unfortunately I am allowed a free set without having to burn through something like a Shark Cannon. It's not a huge deal in terms of the general game, but always important to have an eye on what your opponent's doing, especially with cards like Multirole that require note-taking but don't explicitly allow you to do so by virtue of Yu-Gi-Oh's convoluted rules. We're going to go ahead and add an Afterburners to hand at end step. I don't know what I'm likely to face down, but I have a feeling it'll include some flavor of Darklaw. When they set a card and pass, I realize it's probably over, and we draw an Engage for turn. That makes me feel a little bit better about the free Multirole activation. We'll go ahead and fire off this Engage, and really, the sky's the limit on what we could find here. Anything is going to be extremely powerful. We're going to settle on a copy of Jamming Waves, however. We're going to draw off the Engage, and ooh, a copy of There Can Be Only One. Now, I don't really want to activate that at this point in the game, but it is perfect fodder for the Jamming Waves, allowing us to destroy this set card. I remember that Engage is banished. Again, where is my Italian pasta? We're going to go ahead and activate the second Engage here, and my opponent giving a couple non-verbals here, chewing on his nails, shuffling his hand, and generally wearing a pin that says, "I really wish I weren't playing against Sky Striker right now." We draw an additional card, it's Ray. I'll go ahead and activate Hercules Base, then activate the effect of Multirole to destroy the Hercules Base, and then use the Grave effect of Hercules Base to shuffle back a copy of Kagari so that we can engage 3 times in one turn. These are professional YCS strats here, folks. We'll also shuffle back a copy of Area 0 because why not, I suppose. There's no real reason. We're not going to turn ourselves off of the threshold, and I would prefer there be more copies of Sky Striker cards in my deck than not. I'm going to use Kagari's effect, and my opponent is going to respond with an Effect Veiler, which means we'll only be getting in for 1500 here, and unfortunately that Engage is going to be locked in our graveyard, at least until the end step. We'll set one card, allow our opponent to cut the deck, and then at end step resolve Multirole for 1, and Shizuku's effect as well. That Multirole, of course, is going to be able to grab and engage, and with no engages in the graveyard, the Shizuku can get the 3rd copy from our deck to our hand. This sets up for an extremely explosive next turn, which I will be more than happy to execute if we are allowed to stay in the game that long. I'll go ahead and add the 3rd Engage, and my opponent will finally be permitted to play Yu-Gi-Oh!, at least for the short term. They're going to draw a card, and then decide that actually it's time for game 2 anyway. So Hero is a blind second deck, but you'll notice that our opponent not only won the die roll, but also elected to go first last game. They confided that that's something they like to do in the dark, because the utility of Dark Law versus decks like Salamangreat and Sky Striker is just unmatched. They're going to lead game 2, attempting to resolve a Dark Law over the course of the turn, likely. They'll normal summon a copy of Solid Soldier, and boy, we've been there. They'll Fusion Destiny, we have the Ash, but they have the Called, and yikes, looks like we're going to have to play a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! After all. Fusion Destiny is one of the reasons to play Hero. It's 2 foolish burials, here allowing him to dump both a copy of Drawhand and a copy of Malicious. Drawhand, of course, is not my Fusion Destiny target of choice. I'm a Celestial man myself. But both of them make Dystopia, an extremely powerful fusion monster with the ability to pop a single card, provided his attack is different than his original attack. He'll banish a copy of Malicious from the graveyard, and the unlimiting of Malicious has been a huge boon to this deck. It means that it's able to play through 1 additional hand trap, and that combos that would repeatedly end on something like a single Decimator attached to a Dystopia now can go even further. Additional materials translate into additional Dark Laws, for example, provided your hand is willing. They'll special summon a copy of Malicious from deck, and then link summon an extra hero Cross Crusader. This, unfortunately, is going to eat an Effect Veiler. This card's extremely powerful, and is much of the reason that it no longer is an Isolde-style combo deck. To say that a hero link is more powerful than Isolde, even though it locks you, is something, but it really is extremely strong. They're going to make Dread Decimator here, a card that, in a vacuum looks pretty terrible, and then they're going to get a copy of Malicious from deck. This is the 3rd one. Decimator, of course, raises the attack of all the monsters it's linked to, which is really good if you're making Dystopia, and really bad if you're ending on a defense position Malicious. Afterwards, we're going to take a quick look at the graveyard, set a card, and pass it back to us. And 2 hand traps seem to have gotten us out of the weeds. We should be able to play through this exceptionally easily. The first thing we're going to do, of course, is allow them to resolve the effect of Draw Hand. This draws us each an additional card. You can see my opponent has drawn an Ash Blossom. Must be nice. We have a copy of Jamming Waves, which is important because if that set card is Mask Change, we're going to have a problem. I decide I probably should test for it now. We'll activate Jamming Waves, targeting the set card, and thank the Lord it's Twin Twister. That could have been bad too, but having MST is extremely strong. We'll activate Upstart Goblin, putting our opponent's life points at a healthy 9,000. Before activating Hornet Drones, and hey, what do you know, that's 3 spells in the graveyard. We'll go into a copy of Kaina here, targeting our opponent's copy of Dread Decimator. Of course, we don't want to activate the effect of Kagari until we have an Engage in the graveyard. Here's the Engage, here's the Ash Blossom, and here's the reminder that it's still undercalled by the grave. Oof! I do like that a card this strong is both reciprocal and lasts long enough that it would be relevant on my turn. We're going to go ahead and add a Area 0 to hand. And from here we should be able to pop off suitably, provided we have a single card. Yeah, eventually I do decide on the Area 0, thinking to prioritize the multi-roll first, but I don't think the hand has anything else relevant in it, and on the off chance we're able to do what we want early, it's probably better to have this. If we eat a Veiler here, for example, I would much prefer to have an Area 0 in my opener than a multi-roll with no more Sky Striker spells. We'll activate Engage, and we find a copy of multi-roll. We'll draw a card as well. Oh, what a fair, unique mechanic. I suppose I can't be too harsh. This is the whole reason to play the deck, of course, but boy does it feel bad to be on the receiving end of. We're going to activate Area 0, targeting our set card, and we find Terraforming, Pankratops, and Double or Nothing. Double or Nothing was glued to my hand. There was one match in which I drew Metal Foes Fusion off of Metal Foes Fusion twice in a row, followed by a Double or Nothing. And let me tell you, folks, that's the most debilitating thing that can happen in your life. We'll attack with a Hayate. I want to get this last Malicious off the table. Importantly, we can send a Ray here, which we don't already have in the graveyard because our monsters have been made with a copy of Hornet Drones and are therefore vulnerable to destruction. The last thing I want is to be left Rayless. After the battle phase, we're going to set a card. Then, of course, we'll link summon a copy of Shizuku. Thankfully, the bread and butter plays of this deck aren't particularly difficult to memorize, even if I do screw up corner cases. And then we've activated, I believe, 1 Sky Striker spell. We'll activate the effect of Shizuku first to get a copy of Eagle Booster. We'll activate Eagle Booster targeting Shizuku, which allows us to multi-roll for 2. We're going to set both the Eagle Booster so we don't get OTK'd, a Real Fear in a deck that includes Malicious Bane, and a copy of Engage as well. We've got an effect failure in hand, and we'll pass it back to our opponent. You can see our opponent has a second copy of Fusion Destiny, but revealed they're only playing the one target. They aren't on Dangerous. Just not enough room. The first thing our opponent is going to do is check the graveyard to see if they have extra copies of Malicious. Unfortunately, they do not. We've got, I think, 4 or 5 spells in the graveyard, so they're brought down a considerable amount, but not so much that Decimator can't still walk over Shizuku. Despite that, our opponent decides I don't want to let my opponent float into Ray, and they'll just pass it back. Great news for us, from here we should be able to win the game quite handily. We'll lead with a copy of Metaverse. We can get Mystic Mine here, which notably does turn off all of our opponent's monsters, but I don't really think I want to be activating it. Really, I just want that empty zone. Next, I'm going to activate Engage, because I have 3 in the graveyard. This will also allow me to draw a card. From here, we should probably be prioritizing removal spells like Afterburners and Jamming Waves. We'll lead with Afterburners. We'll activate Afterburner, targeting the Decimator and the card behind it, which is the second copy of Fusion Destiny. The next thing we're going to do is Link Summon, using our copy of Shizuku. We've got a couple of options here. I think the best one is Hayate attacking into this copy of Draw Hand. We're going to Area 0, targeting our set card. Then we will activate the Eagle Booster, targeting our Hayate. Ugh, not really what I want to see. 2 pretty bad Area 0s in a row, but Ray is better than nothing, so I'll take it. Next, that Hayate is going to attack, and we will send a copy of Ray to the graveyard. Now, all 3 Ray are accounted for. It is probably time to start putting the screws on our opponent before they find a way out. This is why when I play Hero, I'm so married to cards like Celestial. They enable these type of immediate pluses in these scenarios that really matter. If my opponent was able to find 2 cards that could easily be polymerized, something like a Vion, for example, that could be sure to resolve, then they would really be in this game. Instead, they're forced to kind of look at the draw hand that also drew me a card and examine a couple of engages, sighing. At end step, of course, we're going to activate both Shizuku and multi-roll for 2, getting Jamming Waves and Afterburners, threatening as much removal as possible in the meantime. Our opponent's going to draw for turn. They will take a quick look at the hand. It looks like they've found a Called by the Grave before they pass it back to us, and oof, nothing going. We'll lead with a copy of Jamming Waves on the card that's just been set. They'll activate Called by the Grave, targeting the Hayate in the graveyard, so we'll steer clear of that when Link Summoning further. We'll activate this Afterburners, targeting our own monster. Of course, we have the Ray in hand, so I don't feel too bad, minusing myself for a Mystical Space Typhoon. We're going to normal summon a copy of Ray and, oh shoot, I don't know, go to battle phase. We'll attack directly for 1500, then activate Ray's effect in order to go into a copy of Shizuku. No use wasting a Link on a Hayate that doesn't have an effect for another 15. After that, we're going to set 1 card, and because we've activated 2 spells, we'll go ahead and activate multi-roll for 2, remembering, of course, that both these cards are banished. I believe there is 1 remaining target in the graveyard. It's the drones, so we're going to activate the effect of Shizuku to get an engage. This is the 3rd turn in a row we've been able to do that before setting this drones from our graveyard and passing it back to our opponent. Our opponent will draw for turn, and it looks like they're content to scoop it up. Quick 2-0 for Sky Striker. I love Hero. It puts out a ton of offensive pressure, but unfortunately folds to the bevy of control options available to Striker.